So this hour is about existential humanistic psychotherapy. So maybe we can just ask around what people think that is. Yeah.
It's more of a person-centered approach, more of a person-centered as opposed to a purely medical model.
Right. Good. When you say person to person, what are you imagining that means?
Presence.
Presence.
Focus.
Uh-huh.
So basically, allowing you to put your, well, in my opinion,
Yeah.
putting my own needs, getting all my needs out of the way.
Uh-huh.
So food, water, sleep, space, whatever I need,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can be fully present with whoever is in front of me,
Mhm.
give them my best service.
Beautiful. To be really present with the other. Right. Yeah.
Relationship comes to mind.
Relationship comes to mind. Right. You're actually in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Some of you, yeah, Avril.
I was going to say, thinking sometimes of, instead of thinking of symptoms as like sort of an X equals Y sort of thing, instead also thinking of things symbolically and depending on the person's cultural footing, also thinking of it in terms of their own spiritual or their own sort of world beliefs or how they see things, what that can mean for them.
Right. So rather than yeah, so being more open to all kinds of ways of looking at life. Yes.
I kind of like to think of it like you're taking a walk with them along their stage where they're at, and sort of, yeah, being with them on their level, understanding where they're coming from at that moment. So
Right.
you can share that journey with them.
Beautiful. So it's actually walking with. So the analogy. Can I use you for a moment? What's your name again?
Jane?
Jane. Jane.
Jane.
Jane. Okay. So this would be one way. So actually, just so as a visual. So existential would be we are going to. So you go. Good. Okay. Right. Good. So that would be existential psychotherapy. Shall we take a break? That's existential psychotherapy. I'm following the client. Do some of you know, since you have some literature majors, Dante, the Divine Comedy, right? What is his trilogy? What is that called? Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradiso, right? Rollo May, some people know Rollo May, the existential psychotherapist, right? He compared the psychotherapeutic journey to the journey, Virgil going down the inferno, down the 7 tiers or 7 levels of the inferno with the client. So basically he's a witness to the client walking into the inferno. And often the therapeutic journey is actually a journey into the underground to look at all the things that we don't really like to look at very much. But then, as Freud actually says, who was actually a very existential psychotherapist by practice, but maybe not in his theoretical writings because he was steeped in the scientific method, but Freud was very fond of saying that what we don't want to accept or see in us is actually what drives us. Think about that one more time. So what you don't really want to understand or see or take on actually drives us. Let's say greedy. Let's say I don't want to really see that I'm also greedy. Because I'm not. We would say, a la Freud, that actually you are not accepting that you too are at times greedy. When that chocolate chip cookie is there and you maybe want to have a second one, or whatever. I mean, greed doesn't have to be corporate Wall Street greed. It can be just that little movement. I hope he doesn't take that wonderful piece. Let me take it, right? I mean, we all have that. Even if it's just a microsecond or a 1 millisecond or whatever in our life, we have it. So if we don't take that in and don't accept that in us as well, jealousy, envy, gluttony, what are all the 7 sins, right? then that will actually drive us. It will come out in ways that is not really conscious to us, because we're not accepting that in us, so we don't actually see it. So what we don't accept in us will drive us in some way. So walking with the client into the underground, oh thank you, the whiteboard is a nice transitional object. And give me your name again. What is your name again?
Michelle?
Michelle. As Michelle said, it is being present is actually the foundation of existential therapy, because what does it actually mean when I'm really present with somebody?
You're empathetic and looking through their lenses.
You're empathetic and you're looking through their lenses. In order to look through somebody else's lenses, what do you need to do?
You need to understand them, first of all, and see what's going on with them, and then be able to empathize with that so that you can more or less relive their understanding, and that way you get a better understanding of what's going on.
Beautiful. Give me your name again.
Cedric.
Cedric. So Cedric, for you to really be with the other, where do you have to be?
I have to be neutral. I have to lose me so that I can find you.
Good. Neutral is complex, but you can lose you, meaning I am not interested in my agenda. Mm-hmm. Now, do you see how that is in almost complete contrast to what we are being trained in therapy school? Because what do they teach us in therapy school?
We have to be analytical. We have to understand what's going on with them and be able to direct them to heal them.
That's right. Right? Have you ever heard of hypothesizing? Do they still teach you that? You constantly need to have an hypothesis about what's going on. You constantly are thinking, aha, this is what's happening now. Aha, this could be this is what's going on. Oh no, this is what's going on now. You are constantly being asked to be in your head hypothesizing about what might be going on in the client. Very tough to be present with the client, because I'm in my head thinking what is going on while something is going on that I'm not seeing, because I'm too busy thinking about what I think should be going on.
When you're thinking at that level, there's no being lived in the moment.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. If you can learn in this year moments of being present, where actually without any agenda you can actually feel for a moment what is going on, what might be going on. Or you don't even have to know what's going on, because Cedric will pick up somehow that you're fully there. And that already is, in some sense, what probably you would need. Or I, myself, being as empty as I can suddenly have an epiphany and say, that's what's going on. Because I'm open, I'm not filled with an idea of what it should be like. Which is very different from our model of constantly diagnosing. Remember? Right? That's the constant idea. I'm doing a diagnosis. I'm trying to keep intellectual understanding alive so that I can figure out what's going on. Yeah.
I will say too, like having been here, or having an agenda here that you'll really quickly learn not to have one, because many of the residents are in a very good agenda meter, and depending on their level of feistiness, will call you out on your agenda, or it will close down on when you go away.
That's right.
So I know that's like one of the biggest things I learned last year was, as hard as it is, the moments where I let go of my agenda, there's some residents that interaction wasn't possible until that happened.
Right. So isn't that amazing that that residents, elders figure out quickly whether you are sitting there with an idea of what to do versus you're just really open to their process, right? Good. So Vincent, talk to me briefly about that you want to maybe say something more theoretical about it, or practical, or comprehensible?
Actually, yeah. Drawing first.
Target.
That's nice. Thinking more concentric circles, maybe not concentric. So, during the course of my training, I had the opportunity to, existential-humanistic therapy is something that's been included in many schools and many training programs. It's always included just a little bit. You get one course on it. It's usually at the beginning. You get done with that, you finish, and then you get to the meatier stuff, or at least what is based off of, I guess, the majority of what people believe the meatier stuff, i.e. the CBT and the psychodynamic type-based therapies. That's been opening up a little bit with the new wave of mindfulness-based therapies and such. But over the time of me working here, I've realized that one thing that's very unique about this population and this placement is that we are working with people that really lend themselves very well to the concept of existential humanistic therapy, to all of the bits and pieces that make up a part of that make up what the theory is. And the way that I like to think about it is, it's like when I was young, I used to have these conversations. I was raised in a Catholic family, but my mother was very traditionally Filipino Catholic, and my father was a bit more on the adventurous side. Still Catholic, but we work up exciting concepts like Buddhism and things like that. And one thing that he would always tell me is that, Vincent, Buddhism is not a religion. Buddhism is a set of beliefs that can be incorporated into any sort of thing. Now, that granted, those were his words, and I know everything's a little more complicated, but the way this ties into existentialism is I believe that existential humanistic therapy is similar in that sort of way, in that you have all of these different schools of thought. You have cognitive behavioral therapy, you've got the various shades of psychodynamic therapy. But the one thing that research has ever shown or proven is that the relationship and the connection between therapist and client is what creates the sort of healing and the change. And in that way, existential humanism actually is a facet of all of these different schools of thought. It may not be identified as such, or even given the credit of the place that it's in, and maybe gloss over as just the basic step of any therapy is building rapport with the client. But still, like, the roots of it and the mentality of it is kind of underlying all of the work that we do in any sort of helping profession, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But to get back to what I really wanted to talk about, I had the opportunity through the course of my training, going through my competencies and stuff, to have one of our existential humanistic therapists on my panel when I did my big case presentation. And one of the biggest feedbacks I needed to do was to work in more of this concept of who the person was and that sense of self. So in order to do that, I was asked to read a particular book by Jay Bugenthal, and I read said book. I did my remediation assignment, rewrote the thing. It all went very well, and I'm standing here before you today. But there was one bit of it that I took that kind of has stuck in my mind, and that I've been able to mull over more as I've been getting more experience in working with this population and also being trained and kind of supervised into this model. And it's this idea that, so you have the person in the center here, right, the self. And around this are different levels of ways that the person can engage with that said sense of self. And Jay Bugenthal described the different levels of therapy as different levels of depth that people can go into. So in the first level of depth, you have, cognitive behavioral type things where there is a definite identified sort of problem. I'm just going to write CBT right here. There's a definite sort of identified problem, and it works very well with our culture and our society. You identify something that's going wrong, and you come up with very concrete solutions to fix it. And that is fantastic if it's something like a phobia or, social anxiety, maybe a habit that doesn't really work out so well that you'd like to break, or just, even a mental habit, like a sort of cognitive schema that you've got going on that you'd like to adjust. Then cognitive behavioral therapy works really, really fantastically well for that, and that takes care of one sort of layer of the problem. The next level up would be psychodynamic therapy. Actually, I got those here shorthand. And psychodynamic therapy is seen as a step in depth down. Not only are you looking at a particular issue, a particular problem that needs some sort of solution to in order to get someone in, but you're also taking a step further to look at what is once removed from this problem. What are the origins of it? What are these things that underlie that created the problem in the first place? It's insight-based therapies, basically. It's kind of generating a better understanding of a sense of self. Figuring out, okay, I get anxious in social situations because I keep going to social anxiety. I wonder if that's something. I get anxious in social situations because when I was young in relationship with my parents, you know, they gave me this sort of message about things, and I learned and internalized this sense of self in the world. Now that I know that, I can see where it comes up, and I can use that insight to kind of adjust myself and have a better knowing of myself. And so that would be the next level of psychotherapy. And according to Jay Bugenthal, there is an additional level on top of that. There is the level of what existential humanistic interventions tend to do. So let's write that in. And existential humanistic interventions take it even a step further from just going down 2 levels into the inside of your own personal behavior. Once you understand who you are and why you do what you want to do, is that the end of self-exploration? According to Jay Bugenthal, it's not. There is this additional thing. Once you get this sense of self, once you see yourself for who you are, once you gain the insight into why it is that you do the things that you do, then there's this additional level of being able to step outside of that, to look at it and to say to yourself, this is great, I like these aspects of it, I maybe don't like these aspects of it, but ultimately I can look at it from a meta level and make adjustments on that. And so that is exactly what existential humanistic therapy is, at least what I gathered from it. And granted, I'm still, you know, as you are all students, continuing to learn and to refine my understanding of it. But existential humanistic therapy is the ability to not just kind of understand who you are, but also to realize the greater freedom of existence and the ability to kind of adjust that greater sort of picture and to change, you know, with the times.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the connection, just get
Go
a
ahead.
bit more. The connection that this has with this population is the fact that these older adults have been through a lot of these changes. You know, they've lived through entire lifetimes and have, you know, made the progression to the final step. So if anyone is kind of in the position to really be able to appreciate the idea of looking at things from a whole, taking an outside step and a perspective and kind of understanding that no matter what your sense of self is, there are things that come up in life, there are transitions and changes that kind of come aside and just blindside and kind of, you know, shift it off to the side. They've experienced that already and are in this very, very open place to talk about and explore it. So I believe personally that that's why existential humanistic psychotherapy has always been associated, you know, whenever you look at it, it's associated with the concept of death and dying. It's associated with the, you know, concept of aging and such and things like that. That is the time in which it's seems to be most apparent to people, but it's something that is constantly existing that we're going through. So I guess the final summation of this is this population is particularly ripe for exploring these issues of, you know, their existence and kind of what's going on, who they've been in the past, who they are now, who they'd like to be, and how to shift it. So by, you know, the train it and receive here is actually quite apropos, as it really fits into the life stage that our residents are in the first place. It's really quite a lovely matching of theoretical orientation to population.
Beautiful.
Is that what I wanted to say?
One
Yeah.
thing I would add to that is also it's a right place to look for meaning in one's life,
Mhm.
because you get to step back and you get to take a look at the whole, and you can go find certain meaning of when things are meaningful and create new meaning of your existence as it is now.
Absolutely, thank you. I missed that. You're right. It's also the added perspective of kind of having been so back and having more of the ability to look back in hindsight and kind of add more information into your heuristic of yourself.
Question, Michelle.
Just quickly, you can draw another circle around the self, and just my brain is like, go up to that. What would be just outside the self?
You know what? I actually meant to put CBT here a second and make here an existential right there.
So then maybe it's simply the life force around the self.
You could say that.
Yeah.
Actually, another realization I had is that this sort of whole idea of these different levels of, you know, psychotherapy, or, you know, depth of psychotherapy and the place of existential humanistic psychotherapy within said, you know, sort of circle or model. We do love models in our profession. Is it really also ties into the concept of the betas, which I also learned in said existential humanistic class, where there are these different levels of existence and significance. So I was just thinking about that when I was looking at it and thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, Sven.
Yeah, when you're talking about Jay Fusion Talk, you mean James Fusion Talk?
Jim, yeah, Jim.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
James or Jim.
Mhm.
Some people think it's like Jay.
Yeah, yeah, good, yeah.
And one other thing, I had the pleasure of working with him myself, and one thing he taught me that, in addition to everything you're saying, was just to be in the moment. When I was working with him, it was like he was so present in the moment. It locked on. I felt like he locked on with a laser. And that's how present he was. And what he would say to someone he was working with in the moment, he could look at everything simultaneously, every little movement, cough, everything. Oh, that was a self-deprecating laugh you just did. You know. But anyway, he was so connected that he would say to me and others that he was coaching, he would say, "We will never have this moment together ever again. So what we do in this very moment is important from moment to moment to moment." And he really lived that.
Yeah,
And that was a gift that he taught me.
very beautiful. The one thing that I wanted to add to this, because you were talking about psychodynamic, is kind of the search, and Jim was fond of saying that most psychotherapy is basically handled like a detective story, right?
Yeah.
We got to figure out what went wrong, right? Anal and right. God forbid something went right. Right. Now, a detective story, which is a search for the etiology, right, for what happened, is, I exaggerate to make a point, the opposite of being present. So I am actually encouraging you to become aware of your tendency, my tendency, to want to look for some root cause, to abandoning that whole idea and actually just being here in the moment. Because really, let's face that, even if we knew that Nader is this way and that way because he fell down the stairs at 7, so what? Really think about it. So I fell down the stairs when I was 7 and hit my head and then something, and then now I am whatever. What will that do? Right? It's great in the medical model because you may want to find the root cause of something, but from a psycho-spiritual point of view, it really is not very helpful. It actually is contraindicated when you want to be present. So one more time, the detective story is in opposition to being present. I'm not looking for some reason, I'm not looking for a cause. I'm looking for what shows up in the moment. As a matter of fact, history is not important unless it shows up in the moment. Right? So when we say be present, that means be present with what is present. So I would not ask questions. Actually, Jim Buchanan was fond of saying, don't ever ask a question. If you have to ask a question, you're not being therapeutic. Why would he say that?
Because you're not paying attention to what the client is. You're paying attention to what's your agenda.
Exactly, because a question often is about my agenda. Right? So he would differentiate between process comment and what's the opposite of that? Content. So content, what's a content question? Content and process. Say again? That's right. Content is about wanting to find some information. It's an information-based idea. What about your mother? Was your mother also this way? Did she also wear glasses? Was she also doing that? Your dad, your mom, your whatever? That's content. And that gets pulled by a question. Or talk about Jim, one of his pet peeves was how we as therapists always seem to be hanging on a little question at the end. For example, that sounds really interesting. And then what did you do? right? Versus that sounds interesting, and then let it be. As if you weren't asking a question, the client would suddenly just drop dead and not be able to know what to do.
What I hear what you're saying on that one is like when the clients are talking and you say that sounds interesting, and if you leave it there, then it really is interesting.
Exactly.
But if you turn around and say, well, what happened next? You just turn around and say, you know what, I said it's interesting, it's not.
That's right.
I want to know the next thing.
So this is where I want to go back. I want you guys to remember throughout the year my little walk with Jane. She walks and I follow her. Questions means I want the client to follow me because I'm actually determining what's interesting and what's not. Do you guys get that? That's really huge. You know, nobody told me that until a few weeks ago. Go ahead.
I think as we're discussing this, what's coming up for me is the power dynamic that is usually inherent in the
Yes.
therapist and
Very beautiful.
the person coming into therapy. The therapist is the expert.
That's
they
right.
study
Beautiful.
these different concepts and theories. So they're the ones in charge. They're the ones that are
That's right.
that are
Supposed to be in
they're
charge.
supposed to be in charge.
That's right.
In the humanistic model, you're more on an even level. There is no power dynamic. And in essence, the person coming into therapy is in a position of power.
Exactly. But that's great. Exactly. However, power, I don't want to even say however. That's right. And we can bring awareness to it. I just would like to be bringing awareness to the fact that you're coming to me and you're thinking I'm the expert. And in some degree I'm an expert, maybe not exactly in what you think I should be an expert in. I don't really have answers, but I can help or guide or witness your process. So that's what I'm an expert in, is trying to help us both with awareness of what is actually going on. Not with my understanding or interpreting or guiding you, but so my power is, so you actually are bringing awareness to the fact that yes, you do have power, but maybe not in the way that the client thinks you have power. Because otherwise it's crazy making, because you do have power. You know, you get the check, so you want to acknowledge that there is a power differential. So, but let's work with the power differential. You're not keeping it a secret, but rather you're working with it, right? So that's important. So a content question would be, so what about your mother? Tell me more about this and that. Process would be what?
Be like, what was that like for you? What, like, you know, how did you feel?
That's right. You could say that. Yes. How is that? A process is actually even more, Lauren. I'm even thinking more with what it is that you perceive. Cedric, you're nodding.
I'm listening to what she's saying, and I'm understanding that process is more about what you're trying to diagnose, and you're looking for some type of justification for that, and that's the process question.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That's also one way of looking at it. And I think what I was actually more thinking, I am noticing the process. So I can say, you're wearing sunglasses, right? Processing that way is I am with what is actually. You're nodding, right? You're kind of holding your hands, right? Your leg is kind of stretched out, you know? You've been quiet. Huh?
That's unusual.
Well, that's unusual. And now we can go, oh, you often don't see yourself as quiet.
I'm pretty chatty.
You're pretty chatty, right? And you laugh when you say that.
Well, it's true.
Right, good.
I'm inquisitive, so I talk a lot.
You talk a lot, right? So I am just trying to mirror actually what is happening right now as you're, so you laugh, you this and whatever. And I don't know where this is going. I'm just, just being with him in the process. Versus, oh, when you were just laughing, were you thinking about somebody? Right? I mean, do you see this? Was that a nervous laugh, right? Or, for example, talk about interpretation. When I look at you, I can say, oh, Sue-Ann, you look sad. How do I know that she looks sad? It's my interpretation that she looks sad. So what would be a process statement that would allow her to actually say something about what she feels like without me imposing myself on her? Because she's also a good client, meaning if I say, oh, you look sad, often what is the client's tendency? Yeah, you're right, right? Because I'm I'm in power, right? So what could I say to Sam when I think, oh, That's an interesting expression, right? Or something that is more neutral, that allows her to say, yeah, I feel sad, or actually I was just contemplative. Maybe she was reflective. Maybe she was ruminating. She was pondering. Who knows? But when I say, oh, you feel sad, I'm imposing my idea of what I think she's like. How do I know what sad is for her? I have no clue. She might be interiorly totally happy, jumping up and down, but she doesn't want to share it with me. Right? Who knows? People are really complex. Ever heard that? Right? So that's rich. So process is actually you're making comments in the moment. You're just, actually, you know what is a wonderful definition of process? Or just remember it. I notice. That's the definition. Actually, if you can do that throughout this year, you'll be done. I notice. I notice you seem to smile. I notice you got black hair. I notice you're sitting still. Whatever. Yeah.
Just thinking about the process work sorts of stuff that we've learned, one thing that I think is a really good way of understanding different content and process, and also why one seems inherently more valuable, is content really only focuses on information, right? It's a verbal channel. Someone can say something to you or tell you sorts of things. But process, noticing process and noticing what's going on, and in addition to the words that are being said and the ideas that are being communicated, add access to a whole deeper level of sorts of communications, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's noticing facial expressions, body language, noticing what's unsaid in a statement, sort of things like
That's
that.
right,
So it
exactly.
just gives you this deeper sort of bit of information, whereas content is really only scratching the surface and is constrained by, you know, the fact that verbal expression is verbal expression. It can only convey so much.
That's very true.
Reflection of the person asking the question.
Exactly.
Person-centered.
That's very beautiful. That's very beautiful. So questions in content almost is more about you as a therapist, versus process is actually more about what's going on with the client or with the elder, right? The other thing that content does and process is really, if you think about where does change occur in you, where do you live? Where do you live? Where do you as a human being live? Where do you feel alive? Where do you feel things are happening? In your body? Yes, in your body you're pointing here. How come you're not pointing there? Who is living here? Anybody living here? Those 2 inches? It comes and goes. Sometimes I live there, right? Much too often. That's right. So the subjective self, where you feel, where you love, where you hate, where you get upset, where you get anxious, where is that happening?
Your gut.
Everywhere.
Huh?
Your gut.
In your gut. That is right. I mean, that's at least right to me. I don't know what's right for you. But for me, it's in my gut. This is where everything is happening. The butterflies, the concern, the fear, the love. I mean, it's all kind of here, not in here. Right? I mean, here I try to analyze it and understand it and do all kinds of things with, but I'm living here. So this is my subjective self. When do you know that a client is really doing his or her work? Is when they are living in here. And when do you know that they're living in here? When they are sitting with you in a session. I'll give you an example. Hey Suan, hi.
Hi.
I'm so glad I'm back here seeing you. You've been really helping me a lot. You know, I want to just tell you the whole issue about my abuse thing, that just made so much sense to me. Because when my dad came, you know, I was about 7, 8. I mean, it was great how you pointed that out. It was just amazing because I know he had that knife, but actually it wasn't just the knife that he was listening. I was actually, when I was running away, there was this other utensil, the fork. It was an amazing fork thing. But, you know, I kind of just left and then I ran out of the house. I went over to my aunt's house and I stayed there. It was really great. She was good. Was she a cook? An amazing cook. I mean, God, you should see the potatoes she was cooking. It was incredible. Thank you so much for getting me through this whole process. I think I'm really done. Thanks so much.
But how are you feeling?
You know what? I think the bus is actually hitting. I mean, I gotta go really. Yeah, no, really.
Maybe we should see each other again.
Really?
Do you
Oh, I mean, I actually worked this whole, when you pointed that thing out about the dad and the knife thing, I think I really got it. It was clear to me. And I understand this whole thing much better now.
The way I'm hearing you is like up here in your head, but I don't get a sense that it's embodied in any way that you
Embodied?
Speaking from the heart, from the gut. From
The heart doesn't speak. What are you talking about? You guys, you shrinks, man. It's just amazing. Oh, God.
Peace out.
But that's often what happens. You have stories. These are the stories that we are used to, that we tell each other, and especially when I speak these stories in this speed, I am not connected exactly as what Sue Ann says. I'm not connected to myself. I have a story, and these are stories that we all tell ourselves. I can never do this, or I'm always this, and there I go again, and whatever and whatever. But actually, as a therapist, in order to do life-changing therapy, we got to work on that level here. And this is the level of not knowing. So any speed, any words, as a matter of fact, you know what this is like? I'm exaggerating to make a point. I actually don't know. Last time that's what this level is. You don't know the words. You don't know the story. You're waiting for something to come. Where do words come from? Right? The words come from somewhere. Where do they come from? If they come quickly, then that's a story up here. I've told myself this story again and again. So when you have a client, and a client is never wrong, an elder is never wrong, so you say, thank you for telling me the story. Actually, I appreciate it because you told me that last time, the same story. And thank you. And I'm here because I'm here for you. You might need to tell the story many more times. I'm here for you. But I also want to let you know, you're telling me the same story. And now we've almost spent 45 minutes where you have been telling me the story. And that's okay, because you might need to tell me the story. But I actually want to ask you, is in anything that you said today something that surprised you? Was there anything that surprised you today? And in all likelihood, if I'm telling the same story again and again, there's going to be very little that surprised me. Right? Because I know the story. It's the same story. So you know a client has done the work when he or she will say, yeah, I didn't know I was so affected by that, or something. Then there is a moment of surprise. So be careful with what Jim would call the cafe clutch, the tea thing. Just let's have tea together and we banter some words back and forth, call it quits, and then we go and see each other again. Right? There's no life-changing work happening because it's not happening here. It's all in here. Right? So what do questions do? They take you up here. So you have a client who's really doing his or her work. Is kind of lost. I just don't know. Feeling the existential angst. What am I doing in this life? What am I born for? What am I here for? And I'm just deep in somewhere. And then the therapist goes, so what does that feel like? What does that feel like? Do you see the energy shifts? I'm completely in my process, and suddenly the question comes. What does it remind you of? What does it remind me of? Now I have to please the therapist because I got to say something smart, right? Or something. So those are the issues that you're going to be dealing with, especially as Vincent says so beautifully, our group of elders has been around the block many more times than many of us here, right? and to really be present and allow them to deal with issues that are going to be many times a lot tougher than any one of us ever deals with. Dying, I have a few years left. I'm in an assisted living or in a community of other people, not very standard in a independence-loving country like the US, right? I'm cared for. People diaper me, people wash me, people groom me, people feed me. So here I am. These are my last years of my life. And you're going to talk to me about what my mother did? Unless I bring it up. Or you're going to, you understand? It's just a whole different existentially governed depth or whatever, I have
That's a good word for it. That's what I was thinking.
What?
Oh, it's like there was, I'm kind of dating myself and showing my interest, but there was a game I remember from my childhood where essentially you are digging down as deep as you can go, and the point of the game is to get as far down. It was one of those games that didn't really end. It was kind of a high score type thing. But as I'm thinking about it now, that's kind of what a metaphor for life is. We're going through it at this certain time, and every bit that we've lived, we're digging deeper down to this thing. There's a farther distance we've traveled. There's more layers that we've gone through. We have access to more things. We have more hindsight, more retrospect information. So I guess that is what the existential thing is. It's the accumulation of all of this knowledge that you've had, all of this experience that you've had, and the things that we realize as we gain more and more of it. The going through periods of ennui, the self-changes, the adjustments, the new developments that we have, the shifts that we do in our personality, the inventions that we have of ourselves as we go through our lives. All of this stuff as we go down doesn't really just kind of stay there and stay in the past. It's an accumulation.
Yeah.
And so the deeper that you get, the more that there is to work with there.
Beautiful.